I put the car keys in the vase next to the front door, as I'd done for the past 3 years, and immediately smelled fried onions coming from the kitchen. The house had the familiar atmosphere of an evening meal. The TV was on in the living room, the stomping of children's feet somewhere upstairs, and the voices of Kevin and Jessica coming from the kitchen. I took off my coat and hung it in the hallway, noting to myself that the hook under Jessica's jacket was bent again. We'd have to fix it tomorrow or buy a new one. The little things that I automatically noticed and automatically took care of became an integral part of my life in this house. In the hallway was Jacob's bike, which I'd asked him to put in the garage for the third week in a row. Emily's sneakers were lying next to it, dirty from yesterday's walk in the park. I picked them up and put them on the shoe rack, machine wiping the dirty marks on the tile with my handkerchief. These little signs of disorder irritated me more and more, but I kept silent, not wanting to make a scandal over the smallest things. "Dad, are you home?" Kevin called out, but his voice didn't have the usual cordiality, more like the businesslike tone of a man who'd been waiting for me to arrive for a specific reason. I made my way into the kitchen, where my 37-year-old son sat at the table with his laptop, and Jessica stood at the stove, stirring something in a skillet. On the computer screen, I noticed vivid images: casinos, hotels, swimming pools. Las Vegas. Those neon lights and luxurious interiors immediately gave away the subject of their conversation. Jessica turned to me with a smile I'd learned to recognize as a precursor to some kind of request. In 34 years, I'd studied her smiles to the finest detail. There was the sincere one when she was genuinely pleased, the polite one for outsiders, and this one, the ingratiating one that always appeared before she asked for a favor. "Surinam, Robert, it's so good of you to come," she said, taking the pan off the fire. "Kevin and I were discussing a great idea." Kevin looked up from the screen and nodded at me, as if greeting a business partner before an important negotiation. His dark hair was a little disheveled, and he had the same smile on his face that his wife had, conspiratorial, full of anticipation. I sat down in my usual place at the kitchen table, the same place where I'd eaten breakfast every morning for the past 3 years, where I'd helped my grandchildren with their homework, where I'd read the newspaper while Jessica prepared dinner. "Yes," I said, noticing that 3 plates and utensils were already on the table. Jessica always set the table beforehand, but tonight I saw something special in the way she arranged the water glasses, a little more solemn than usual. "Remember Rick from my old job?" Kevin started, keeping his eyes on the screen. "The one who worked in the marketing department, the tall one with the red beard. He got married last year to that girl from accounting, Sarah, I think, and they're finally going on their honeymoon. Invited us to join them 2 couples, a week in Vegas, the works." Jessica came over to the table and sat down next to her husband, her eyes glowing with the excitement of the upcoming adventure. She always looked that way when it came to travel, entertainment, any event that could diversify her humdrum life as a housewife. "Can you believe we haven't been on vacation in 2 years?" she added, fixing a strand of dark hair. "Rick says the hotel is terrific. 5-star rooftop pool overlooking the strip, spa, restaurants with Michelin chefs, and they partially pay for the plane tickets because they have some credit card bonuses. It's a great deal." I listened to them and understood where the conversation was going. Over the years of living together, I had learned these intonations, these looks, this way of presenting information. First a beautiful picture, then details, and at the very end a request that actually sounds like a statement of fact. Kevin had always done that when he was a kid, when he wanted a new toy or permission to spend the night at a friend's house. "Sounds interesting," I said neutrally. "When do you plan to go?" "Now that's the tricky part." Kevin turned the laptop in my direction, showing me the calendar on the screen. "They can only go next week, Monday through Sunday. Rick has already made reservations at the best restaurants, tickets to a Cirque du Soleil show, and some new performance with magic. An opportunity not to be missed. Trips like this come once in a lifetime." Jessica got up and brought a plate of fried chicken and vegetables from the stove and set it in front of me. It smelled good. She was a good cook. I always recognized that, but somehow my appetite was gone. Maybe it was the way she looked at me, expecting a certain reaction. "Of course, we realize this is sudden," she continued, putting food on for herself and her husband. "But the kids are used to you. You know all their habits, school schedules, where things are in the house. Emily has to go to the dentist on Thursday for a checkup. I've already written down the time in my notebook. And Jacob has soccer practice on Tuesday and Friday, plus extra math on Wednesday. So you want me to stay with the grandkids all week? I asked, though the answer was obvious. Yeah, Kevin shrugged, as if we were discussing something we took for granted. You're at home anyway, retired, in no hurry. It's expensive and troublesome to find a nanny, and the kids would be stressed out with a stranger. They adore you, and you know this house better than we do. Where everything is, how the washing machine works, the doctor's phone numbers. Jessica laughed her sonorous laugh and added, to be honest, we've already agreed to go. Rick is waiting for final confirmation until tomorrow morning, and we need to buy the tickets tonight before the price goes up. You know how it is. $500 for a ticket today, and tomorrow it's $800. I looked at both of them, the son who was already mentally packing his bags, and the daughter-in-law who seemed to be listing casino outfits in her mind. They sat in front of me, radiating enthusiasm and anticipation, and never for a second wondered if I was comfortable, if I wanted to, if I had my own plans for the week. What if I have things to do next week? I asked, setting my fork aside. What kind of things? Jessica wondered, raising her eyebrows. You're retired. What could be so urgent? Retired people have plans, I said, trying to keep my tone calm. Meetings with friends, doctors, personal matters. Kevin closed his laptop and looked at me carefully, as if trying to see if I was being serious or just grumbling for formality. Dad, we're not asking you to move mountains or change your life. It's just a week with the grandkids you already see every day. Same routines, same kids, same house. We just won't be around. You can even invite your friends to visit if you want. And then, Jessica added, cutting the chicken into small pieces, it's not like we go on vacation every month. The last time we went on a real vacation was before Jacob was born, 8 years ago. Remember that trip to San Diego? You were with Emily then too, and it went great. A stomp came from upstairs, and a minute later, Emily came running into the kitchen in her school uniform, her blonde hair disheveled and her backpack slung over one shoulder. Her cheeks were flushed from racing her brother down the hall. Grandpa Robert! She ran up to me and hugged me around the neck, smelling of baby shampoo and something sweet, probably munching on marshmallows. Can we watch a movie after dinner tonight? There's a new dragon movie on. Sure, baby, I said, feeling the tension in my chest recede a little from the child's warmth. Emily always knew how to lighten the mood with her spontaneity. Go wash your hands, Jessica said. And get Jacob. It's time for dinner. He's playing his games again, and he can't hear. The girl ran upstairs shouting to her brother that dinner was ready and that Grandpa had let her watch a cartoon. Kevin opened the laptop again and started typing something, apparently answering Rick. So, Dad, can we count on you? He asked, not lifting his eyes from the keyboard. I needed to give Rick a final answer, or they'd go without us, and the opportunity might never come again. I looked at his computer screen, where the airline's website was already open in a new tab, and realized that my answer was just a formality for them. They'd buy the tickets anyway, and I just had to give them peace of mind by agreeing to babysit. 3 years ago, as I stood in the empty house after Dorothy's funeral, the silence seemed deafening. 42 years we had lived together in that house with the blue shutters on Maple Street, and now every room held her presence. From the kitchen where she brewed coffee in an old coffee pot every morning, to the bedroom where her perfume still lingered on the dressing table. I wandered between rooms, not knowing what to do with this emptiness that seemed to consume me from the inside out. Kevin arrived the day after the last of the guests had gone home and found me sitting in the living room with Dorothy's pictures strewn across the coffee table. He looked tired. His job at the consulting firm was demanding, and his 2 young children at home didn't give him a break. Jessica stayed with the grandchildren, saying she didn't want to traumatize them with the sight of a grieving grandfather. At the time, it seemed caring to me, not indifferent. Dad, you can't stay here alone, Kevin said, gathering the pictures into a neat stack. This house is too big for one person, and there are too many memories. You need a change of scenery. I was silent, looking at a picture of Dorothy in the garden from last summer. She was smiling, holding a bouquet of roses she had grown herself. It seemed to me that if I left this house, I would lose her completely, that her presence would dissolve without me here, among these walls that remembered our laughter, our conversations, our quiet evenings by the fireplace. Besides, Kevin continued, sitting down next to me on the couch, Jessica and I are going through a very difficult time right now. The mortgage on the house in Irvine is a killer. I'm working 12 hours a day, and she's alone with the kids. Emily's only 7, Jacob's 5. They need attention, help with their lessons. You could be a big help. His words sounded reasonable. Really, why would I want to stay in a house that now seemed like a museum of a past life? Dorothy had always said that family was the most important thing we had. She adored her grandchildren, and the idea that I could be there for them, helping them grow, seemed right. Besides, Kevin was the only child Dorothy and I had been able to have after years of trying, and now he needed my support. Think about it, he said, standing up. You won't be a burden. On the contrary, you'll be part of the family. The kids will adore you, and Jessica and I will enjoy your company. And financially, it will help everyone. You'll sell the house, invest in ours, and everyone will have more stability. After he left, I walked around the empty rooms for a few more days, weighing the pros and cons. The house on Maple Street was large, 4 bedrooms, 2 baths, a spacious living room and kitchen, where Dorothy liked to host guests. Alone, I really felt lost amidst all that space. Every creak of the floorboards, every sound of wind in the windows reminded me that I was here alone now. A week later, I called Kevin and told him I was in. He was so genuinely happy that I had no doubts about the decision. We agreed that I would sell the house and use the proceeds to pay off their mortgage, and in return, I would get a room in their house and the right to consider it my home too. The move took 2 months. I sold furniture that wouldn't fit in the new house, gave away Dorothy's things to her sisters and friends, packed up books and photos. Each item was hard to give away. It felt like I was giving away pieces of my and Dorothy's life along with them. But Kevin and Jessica waited patiently, coming periodically to help, and I could see the relief in their eyes that the financial burden would soon lessen. The house in Irvine greeted me with the smell of fresh paint and children's voices. Jessica had redecorated the room that was to be my new wallpaper, a comfortable bed, and a desk. Emily and Jacob ran through the hallways, excitedly showing me their rooms and toys, talking about school and friends. Their joy was contagious, and for the first time in months, I felt something akin to hope. Will you live with us forever now, Grandpa Robert? Emily asked, hanging on my arm. Yes, baby girl. We are one big family now, I answered, and then the words rang true. The first few months were good. I helped the kids with their homework, read to them at bedtime, took them to the park on the weekends. Kevin did work late, and Jessica was grateful for the help with the kids. We all had dinner together, discussed weekend plans, and watched family movies. I felt needed and useful. The money from the sale of the house covered a significant portion of their mortgage, and I could see how it made life easier for the young family. Kevin stopped looking tired all the time. Jessica started smiling more often. The kids got more attention and care. It seemed that my decision would benefit everyone. Gradually, I began to help with ongoing expenses as well. At first, it was small things. Groceries when I went to the store, gasoline when I dropped the kids off. Then Jessica mentioned that the washing machine was broken, and I paid for the repair without a second thought. When Emily needed braces, I did my part too. It seemed natural. I lived in their house, ate their food, and used the utilities. After a year and a half, I noticed that I was no longer just paying for emergency expenses, but regular bills as well. Electricity, gas, internet, Jessica's car insurance. All of it had quietly moved onto my credit card. When I brought it up, Kevin explained that they were having temporary cash flow problems, that his paycheck was delayed, that they would make it up soon. Dad, we're a family, he said. Oh, when you're old enough, we'll take care of you. In the meantime, you're helping us get back on our feet. It's only fair. Jessica agreed, adding that my contribution to the family budget allowed them to take better care of the children, buy quality groceries, pay for extra classes. And indeed, the grandchildren did not need anything. They had good clothes, toys, the opportunity to practice sports and music. Gradually, I took over almost all the household chores. Cooking, cleaning, laundry, shopping. All this became my area of responsibility. Jessica said she was tired of the kids and needed a vacation, and Kevin cited work. I didn't mind. I liked to feel useful, and I had plenty of free time. After about 2 years, I realized that Kevin wasn't working as much as he claimed. He started staying home more often, playing computer games. Going out with friends? When I asked about it, he said he had switched to part-time work, that he had found a balance between work and family life. Jessica was proud that her husband was spending more time at home. I continued to pay the bills, explaining to myself that it was temporary, that they were young and would still find their way to financial stability. My pension was decent. The savings from the sale of the house hadn't yet been depleted, and I could afford to support my son's family. Plus, the kids were growing up, and I wanted to give them the best of everything. But sometimes, lying in bed in my room, I thought of the house on Maple Street where Dorothy and I planned to spend our old age. We dreamed of traveling, of hobbies, of the time when I would finally be able to do the things I loved. Instead, I turned into an unpaid housekeeper and sponsor whose life is completely subservient to the needs of someone else's family. But these were fleeting thoughts. I would get up in the morning, make breakfast for my grandchildren, walk them to school, and tell myself that it was the right thing to do. That family was more important than anything else. The alarm clock rang at 7:30 in the morning, as it always did on weekdays. I got up without waiting for the beep. 3 years of living in my son's house had developed a habit of waking up before everyone else so that I could make breakfast and get the kids ready for school. Dorothy always said that the morning set the tone for the day, and I tried to make sure the grandchildren started their day calm and nourished. In the bathroom, I washed my face with cold water, cleaned myself up, and went down to the kitchen. The house was still asleep. No sound came from Kevin and Jessica's bedroom, and the children's rooms were silent. Only the ticking of the wall clock in the hallway broke the morning silence. I turned on the coffee maker I'd bought 6 months ago when the old one broke down. 6 months ago when the old one broke down and started making breakfast. Emily liked oatmeal with berries and honey. Jacob preferred peanut butter toast. For the adults, I brewed stronger coffee and sliced fruit. Jessica was a stickler for her figure and often limited herself to a light breakfast. While the oatmeal cooked, I checked the kids' backpacks, making sure their homework was done and in the right folders, and Jacob's gym uniform for gym class was clean and ready. At 7 in the morning, I went upstairs and knocked gently on the door of the children's rooms. Emily, Jacob, it's time to get up. Breakfast is ready. 5 more minutes, Grandpa, Emily grumbled from behind the door. I don't want to go to school, Jacob added. We have a math test today. I smiled. These morning rituals were the same day after day. The kids never wanted to get up, or especially on the Monday after the weekend, or on rainy days. But I learned to be patient and find an approach to each one. Emily, if you get up now, I'll put those frozen berries you like in your oatmeal, I said. And Jacob, do you remember when we did the examples yesterday? You did great, and today's test will be easy. A few minutes later, there was a noise as the kids got up and started to get ready. I went back down to the kitchen and set the table. At 7:20, Emily came down in her school uniform, but with mussed hair and sleepy eyes. Good morning, little girl, I said, handing her a bowl of oatmeal. How did you sleep? Fine, she replied, yawning. Where are Mommy and Daddy? They're still sleeping. Mom was up late last night watching a TV show. Daddy doesn't have to go to work early. Jacob showed up 5 minutes later, wearing one sock and his shirt buttoned wrong. I helped him clean up, found a second sock under the bed, and checked to make sure he had his textbooks on schedule. Grandpa, are you coming to pick us up after school? He asked, spreading peanut butter on his toast. Sure, like always. I'll pick you up at 3 o'clock after practice and Emily at 2:30. Can we go to the toy store today? Emily asked. There are some new dolls there. We'll see, I said, as I always did in these cases. Homework first, then fun. At 8 in the morning, we were ready to go. I checked to make sure the kids had the lunch boxes I'd made the night before, made sure Emily had money for school lunch. She sometimes preferred to buy food in the cafeteria, and we left the house. My old sedan was parked in the driveway next to Jessica's newer car, which I'd also helped buy a year ago. On the way to school, the kids chatted about their plans for the day, recounted dreams, and argued about who would sit in the front seat back home today. Emily read aloud math problems, and Jacob hummed a song he'd learned in music class. These trips always lifted my spirits. The kids were sincere and open, and they made me feel needed. Emily's school was 15 minutes away, Jacob's another 10 minutes. I dropped my granddaughter off first, waited until she walked into the building, and waved at me from the classroom window, then dropped my grandson off. There were always other parents and grandparents gathered at the entrance to his school. We nodded to each other, sometimes exchanging a few words about the weather or school events. "See you after school, champ," I said to Jacob as he got out of the car. "Goodbye, Grandpa." He waved at me and ran toward the entrance where his classmates were already waiting for him. It took another 20 minutes to get home. The schools were at different ends of Irvine, and I had to loop around the city. But I didn't complain. Those morning commutes were part of my routine, and spending time with my grandchildren gave me energy for the day. Silence greeted me at home. Kevin and Jessica were still asleep. Their bedroom was upstairs, and not a sound came from there. I gathered breakfast from the table, loaded the dishes into the dishwasher, wiped down the countertops, and started planning the day. On the fridge hung the shopping list Jessica made every week: milk, bread, vegetables for salad, meat for dinner, laundry detergent, shampoo for the kids. At 10:30, I drove to the supermarket. This also became my duty. I knew the preferences of all family members, knew how to choose quality products and not overpay for unnecessary things. Besides, I had enough time to calmly walk around the store, compare prices, find discounts. In the dairy department, I met Mrs. Collins, a neighbor from across the street. We chatted occasionally. She too was raising grandchildren while her daughter worked. "Good morning, Robert," she said hello, picking out yogurts. "How are you doing? Are the kids in school?" "They're fine, thank you," I replied. "Yes, I just dropped them off. How are yours?" "They're at school, too." "You know, sometimes I think we grandparents work harder than young parents," she laughed. "But what can you do? A family is a family." We chatted for a few more minutes about the weather, the fact that grocery prices had gone up again, and school events. Mrs. Collins was a pleasant woman, but I heard something in her words that made me wonder. Should the care of grandchildren really fall entirely on the shoulders of the older generation? In the meat department, I picked out a chicken breast for dinner. Jessica had asked for something dietary, and the kids love chicken in any form. Then I picked up some vegetables for a salad, some fruit that Emily had taken to school for snack, and a frozen pizza in case I didn't have time to make a full meal. At the register, the girl cashier smiled at me and said, "You have a big family, judging by your purchases." "Yes, I live with my son, his wife, and grandchildren," I replied, paying with my card. "How nice. So you never get bored?" I nodded, but for some reason her words didn't make me happy. I was indeed never bored, but was this the life I had planned for retirement? At home, I put the groceries away, loaded the washing machine, the kids' laundry and school uniforms had piled up, and started preparing dinner. Kevin and Jessica were still asleep, even though it was already 11 in the morning. I heard the alarm clock ring upstairs, then silence again. At noon, Jessica finally came down to the kitchen in her robe and slippers. Her hair was disheveled and her face had pillow marks. "Good morning," she said, yawning. "I can't seem to wake up. I watched a show late last night, a very exciting one." "Sonner, coffee's in the maker, still hot," I said, stirring the chicken in the pan. "And for lunch, we'll have chicken fillet with vegetables." "Thank you." She poured herself some coffee and sat down at the table. "Have you taken the kids already?" Sure. I'll pick up Emily at 2:30 and Jacob at 3 after soccer." "That's great. And I'm meeting some friends for lunch today, so I'll be gone until tonight. We've been planning to go to that new restaurant downtown for a while." I nodded, continuing to cook. Jessica went out with her friends a lot. Shopping, restaurants, beauty salons. It was her social life, and I understood the young woman's need for companionship. But sometimes I thought she took my willingness to take care of the children for granted. "Robert, did you remember that Emily has a dental appointment on Thursday?" she asked, flipping through her phone. "So, and I have to pick up the dry cleaning. It's ready to go." I remembered about the dentist. "I put it on my calendar," I replied. "What's at the dry cleaners?" "My dress and Kevin's suit. We're going to a company party the other day, and I want to look nice." Kevin came down around 1, already dressed but still sleepy. He worked from home 3 days a week, and on those days he usually didn't get up early. "Hey, Dad," he said, pouring himself some coffee. "Thanks for breakfast. Saw what you made for the kids." "You're welcome. Lunch will be ready in 10 minutes. "Great, I'm starving. What are your plans for today?" I told him what I had to do. Pick up the kids from school, help with homework, make dinner, do the laundry. Just a typical day for a retired man living with a grown son. Sounds good, Mom, Kevin said, sitting down at the table next to his wife. I'm going to work from home today. I have a video conference at 3 and then a meeting with a client, so I'll be busy. After lunch, Jessica left to go out with her friends. Kevin locked himself in his office to work, and I was left alone with the housework. I hung out the laundry, vacuumed the first floor, and dusted the furniture. These chores didn't require much effort, but they took up time that I used to spend on my own interests. At 2:20, I went to pick Emily up from school. She ran out to the car with a wide smile and a backpack full of textbooks. "Grandpa, I got an A in math today," she announced, climbing into the front seat. "The teacher said I'm very good at solving examples." "Well done, little girl. I'm proud of you," I said, and it was true. The success of my grandchildren always pleased me more than my own achievements. "Can I not do my homework today?" she asked hopefully. I had an A. "You have to do homework every day, regardless of your grades," I replied. "But if you can do it quickly, we can watch a cartoon." After picking Jacob up from soccer, practiced dirty, happy and full of stories about how he'd scored a goal, we drove home. At home, the kids had an afternoon snack that I had prepared ahead of time, and homework waiting for them. I helped them with math and English, checked how they read, explained difficult points. "Grandpa, why don't Mom and Dad help us with our homework?" Emily asked, solving a math problem. "They work. They get tired," I answered automatically, though deep down I knew it wasn't quite true. "I don't work. I have time." "What are you? Did you help him with his homework when Daddy was little?" "Of course I did. And Mom helped too. We did it together." Emily thought about what I said, but didn't ask again. Kids take reality for granted without analyzing whether it's fair or not. By 6 p.m., Jessica came home satisfied and rested. Kevin came out of his office announcing that the workday was over. I was just putting dinner on the table: baked chicken with vegetables, fresh tomato and cucumber salad, and bread. "It smells so good," Jessica said as she sat down at the table. "Robert, you're a wizard in the kitchen." "Thank you," I replied, putting the food on the plates. "How was your day?" Kevin asked, pouring himself some water. "Did the kids behave?" "They sure did. Emily got an A in math, and Jacob scored a goal at practice." "That's great." Kevin smiled at the kids. "You guys are doing great." At dinner, we talked about weekend plans, school news, and the kids' stories about their friends. The atmosphere was warm and family-like, and at times like this, I felt that my decision to live here was the right one. But when after dinner, Kevin and Jessica went to watch TV in the living room, and I was left to clean up the dishes and get the kids ready for bed, that feeling faded a bit. At 9 p.m., when the grandchildren finally fell asleep, I sat in my room with a cup of tea and thought about the day. It had been fulfilling and rewarding. The kids were happy and fed. The house was clean and cozy. But was this the life I had chosen, or the life that had chosen me? After the kids ran upstairs, I was left sitting at the kitchen table, looking at the vivid pictures of the casino on Kevin's laptop screen. Las Vegas glowed with neon lights, promising entertainment and oblivion from the worries of everyday life. But the longer I stared at those luxurious hotels and restaurants, the more irritation built up in me that had been building up for days, maybe months. "So the decision has already been made?" I asked, trying to keep my tone calm. "Without discussing it with me?" Kevin looked up from the keyboard, slightly surprised by my question. "Oh, what's there to discuss, Dad?" He shrugged. "We're going on vacation. You're staying with the kids. It's simple and logical." "Logical for whom?" I felt the long-suppressed resentment starting to flare up in my chest. "For you, of course. Have you thought about me?" Jessica, who had been eating peacefully until that moment, put down her fork and looked at me in bewilderment. "Robert, I don't see what the problem is," she said in that tone of voice that one uses to explain something obvious to a small child. "You're a grandfather. They're your grandchildren. Isn't it natural for you to take care of them?" "It's natural to take care of them, but it's not natural to become a free babysitter every time you want to have fun," I said more sharply than I'd intended. There was an awkward silence. Kevin closed his laptop and looked at me carefully, as if he were seeing me for the first time. "A free babysitter?" he repeated slowly. "Dad, you live in our house, eat our food, use our utilities. What's there to talk about free?" Your food? I could feel my face starting to burn with indignation. Which I buy with my own money. Your utilities that I've been paying for 2 years? Or maybe your mortgage, which I helped pay off with money from the sale of my own house? Jessica laughed nervously, but there was no mirth in her laughter. Come on, Robert, we didn't ask you to do all that, she said. You offered to help. We just accepted your help with gratitude. Gratitude? I stood up from the table, feeling the emotions I'd been holding back for so long start to come out. Uh, where's the gratitude when you don't even ask my opinion when planning my life? Where's the gratitude when you take my concern for granted? Kevin stood up too, and I could see the irritation in his eyes that he was no longer trying to hide. Look, Dad, he began in the way he'd once spoken to me when I was a teenager, when he thought adults didn't understand. We didn't make you move in with us. You made that decision on your own. We didn't make you pay your bills. You do it yourself. And now you want to dictate how we live? I want basic respect, I replied, trying not to raise my voice so the kids upstairs wouldn't hear. I want to be consulted, not confronted. I want my time and my wishes to be considered. Your time? Adum, Jessica laughed, and there was mockery in that laugh. Robert, you're retired. You don't have any obligations other than the ones you put on yourself. What could be more important than family? That laugh, full of disdain and condescension, was the last straw. I looked at the woman who had benefited from my help and care for 3 years, and realized that for her, I was not her husband's father, not an older family member worthy of respect, but just a convenient tool for solving household problems. I can have a life of my own, I said slowly and clearly. I can have plans, meetings, things to do. I can have wants and needs that don't involve catering to your whims. Whims. Kevin took a step closer to me, and I saw something hard, unfamiliar in his face. We want to go on vacation for the first time in years, and you call it whims? You want to go on a vacation at my expense? I replied, because the money for this vacation is mine. Just like the money for your house, your food, your car, your children's education. I turned into an ATM machine with a babysitting function. Jessica stood up from the table, her face contorted with anger. How dare you, she exclaimed. We gave you a home, a family, the meaning of life. After Dorothy died, no one wanted you, and we took you in. Those words hurt more than a physical blow. I stood staring at my sister-in-law, who had just said what I'd probably thought all these years, that I was a pathetic old man they'd taken in out of mercy. Jessica, Kevin began, apparently realizing she'd gone too far. No, let him know the truth, she persisted. We sacrificed our space, our privacy, our plans for him, and now he's throwing tantrums and tantrums. I was silent, digesting what I'd heard. So all these years when I thought I was helping my family, when I thought I was doing something important and necessary, they'd considered my presence a burden that they'd graciously tolerated. I see, I said at last. So I'm a burden? Not a burden, Kevin tried to soften the situation. It's just, you have to realize that we have our own needs. We're young. We want to live life to the fullest. At my expense, I repeated. You're our father. Kevin snapped at me. Isn't it natural for a father to help his children? Especially when he has the opportunity? It's natural to help, I agreed. But it's not natural to be a cash cow and a servant at the same time. A maid? Jessica laughed that same contemptuous laugh again. Robert, you live in a family. Family responsibilities are normal. Family responsibilities should be shared fairly, I replied. Not on one person's shoulders, just because they have time and money. Look, Dad. Kevin ran his hand through his hair, clearly losing patience. We can talk about this for hours, but the point won't change. We're going to Las Vegas next week, period. The kids are staying home, and someone has to watch them. If you don't want to, that's your right. But then we're going to have to reevaluate our relationship. What do you mean, renegotiate the relationship? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Well, you're a grown man, Kevin shrugged. You can find somewhere else to live. We'll manage without your help. The words sounded like an ultimatum, and I realized that my son, whom I'd raised, educated, and supported, was now threatening to kick me out of the house if I didn't comply with his demands. So I either do what you want or I get out. I clarified. Take care of the grandchildren while we're away, Kevin said in a harsh tone. You don't like it? Leave. Jessica nodded approvingly and added, the choice is yours, Robert. Either you're part of this family with all the responsibilities, or you're an outsider. At that moment, something inside me finally snapped. I looked at my son, who was looking at me with defiance, at my daughter-in-law, who was barely concealing her triumph, thinking that they had intimidated me into submission, and I realized that I couldn't take it anymore. Home? Fine, I said calmly. Since you put the question bluntly, I'll answer it just as bluntly. I'm leaving. Jessica stopped smiling, and Kevin frowned. What do you mean you're leaving? He asked. Exactly what I said, I answered, feeling oddly relieved by the decision. I'm leaving this house, and you can start paying your own bills. Simple as that. The silence that followed my words was deafening. Kevin and Jessica looked at me wide-eyed, as if I had said something completely unbelievable. Dad, you can't be serious, Kevin finally said. This is your family. My family wouldn't give me ultimatums, I replied. My family wouldn't laugh at my humiliation. My family would respect me. But where are you going to go? Jessica asked, and for the first time there was a note of concern in her voice. You don't have another home. I'll find one, I said shortly. Not your concern. What about the money? Kevin took a step toward me. You realize that we can't take care of all the expenses at once, right? We need time to reorganize. That's not my concern either, I said. You're adults, you'll figure it out. Jessica laughed nervously, but it was hysterical. Anawa, Robert, what are you saying? She tried to adopt a conciliatory tone. We're not seriously fighting, are we? It's just that everyone's nerves are on edge. Let's calm down and discuss it calmly. There's nothing more to discuss, I replied. You made your choice when you gave me an ultimatum. Now it's my turn to choose. Dad, think about the kids. Kevin tried a different approach. They love you very much. How can you leave them? How makitan doing? You're the one leaving them when you go to Las Vegas, I replied. And I just refuse to be a convenient substitute for my parents. But it's only a week, Jessica exclaimed. One miserable week. Followed by another, I said. And another, because you're used to me always being available, always willing to help, always paying for everything. But I'm not an ATM machine or a babysitter. I'm a human being. Kevin sat back down at the table and covered his face with his hands. So calm. God, what a drama over nothing, he muttered. Okay, Dad, if it's that important to you, we're not going on this trip. No, I said firmly. Go on the trip. Enjoy your vacation. But without me and my money. Without your money? Jessica turned pale. What do you mean? I mean that I won't pay your bills anymore, I explained patiently. Electricity, gas, internet, groceries, gasoline, clothes for the kids. All of that is your responsibility now. I've been paying it for 3 years, thinking I was helping my family. But since I'm a burden that you graciously tolerate, you don't need my help. Wait, Kevin looked up. We didn't say you were a burden. Jessica was overreacting. Jessica was telling the truth, I replied. The truth that both of you had been thinking, but hadn't dared to tell. Thank her for that, because now I know how you feel about me. Jessica opened her mouth to say something, but I held up my hand to stop her. There's no need for explanations or apologies, I said. It's all been said. Tomorrow I'll start looking for a place to live, and you can plan your life without regard to my abilities and desires. Dad, be reasonable, Kevin asked. We're all tired. We're all on edge. Let's postpone this conversation until tomorrow, when everyone has calmed down. I'm perfectly calm, I replied, and my decision is well thought out. I've let you get on my back for too long. Children's voices came from upstairs. Apparently, Emily and Jacob had heard the raised tones and were interested in what was going on downstairs. Now you're going to have to explain to the kids why Grandpa doesn't live with you anymore, I said, heading out of the kitchen. Sorina, and why they'll have to spend the week with a babysitter while their parents have fun at the casino. I reached the stairs and turned around. Kevin and Jessica sat at the kitchen table like statues, still not believing what had happened. They thought they could intimidate me with the threat of eviction and make me comply. But they miscalculated. Good night, I said, and went to my room to pack my things. My room was silent, broken only by the ticking of the desk clock I had brought from the old house. I sat on my bed and looked around at the space I had considered mine for 3 years. The desk by the window where I read the newspaper in the mornings, the bookshelf with my favorite novels and memoirs, the pictures of Dorothy on the dresser, the chair I liked to sit in the evenings. All these things gave the illusion of home, but now I realized that there had never been a real home here. I pulled an old suitcase out of the closet, the same one Dorothy and I had taken on vacations with when we were younger. The leather was worn at the corners, and the locks were a little jammed, but it was solid and reliable like so many things of our generation. Laying it out on the bed, I began methodically folding clothes. Shirts, pants, sweaters, all the things that made up my modest closet as a 70-year-old retiree. Each item reminded me of some moment in recent years. This blue sweater Dorothy knitted for me the last Christmas before she died, when she was sick but still hoping to recover. This shirt was a birthday present from Kevin and Jessica 2 years ago, one of the few gifts they've given me. I bought these pants myself for a corporate event at Kevin's company, where I was invited as a family member. At the time, I felt like I was truly a part of their lives. As I was putting things away, muffled voices came from downstairs. Kevin and Jessica were whispering furiously, apparently discussing the situation. I could imagine their confusion. They'd thought they could easily intimidate the stubborn old man with the threat of eviction, but instead of submission, they'd gotten a firm refusal to cooperate. I took books off the shelf, a biography of Roosevelt, which I reread every few years, a collection of O. Henry short stories, a volume of Frost poems. These books had been my companions for years, and I couldn't leave them here. Nearby were framed photographs of my wedding to Dorothy, Kevin's birth, and my grandchildren's graduation from kindergarten. Looking at those pictures, I felt mixed emotions, the joy of remembering and the sadness of realizing how things had changed. There was a knock on the door, quietly, tentatively. I knew it wasn't the kids. They always knocked loudly and came running in without waiting for permission. "Come in," I said without interrupting the laying. The door opened and Kevin came into the room. He looked confused and guilty, the way he did when he was a kid, when he'd done something serious and was trying to find a way to get away with it. "Dad, can I talk to you?" he asked, seeing the suitcase on the bed. "Talk," I replied, continuing to fold shirts. "I'm listening." Kevin came into the room and sat in my chair, the same one I used to spend my evenings in, reading or just thinking about life. "Richie, are you really serious about this?" he asked, looking at my packing. "Quite," I answered, without raising my eyes. "You yourself suggested that I leave if I didn't like something. I don't like a lot of things." I said that in a huff. Kevin tried to defend himself. "You know how it is. People say stupid things when they're angry." "Anger usually reveals what people really think," I said, tucking my socks in. "Shamadamininum. You and Jessica were pretty clear about how you felt about me." "Jessica was pretty clear about that too," Kevin said. "She didn't mean to hurt you." I finally lifted my head and looked at my son. His face was troubled, but not remorseful. He was trying to make amends, not because he knew what he had said was wrong, but because he was afraid of the consequences. "Kevin," I said patiently, "your words were deliberate, not spontaneous. You've thought that about me for a long time, but you just didn't dare say it to my face." "That's not true," he countered. "We appreciate you, Dad. You do a lot for us." "I do," I agreed. "But do they appreciate me for it? Or do they just take advantage of my willingness to help?" Kevin was silent, pondering the answer. His silence was more eloquent than any words. "Look," he finally said, "maybe we do take your help for granted. Maybe we don't show our gratitude enough. But that doesn't mean we don't love you." "Love is shown in actions," I replied, closing my suitcase. "In respect, in caring for the feelings of a loved one. And what do I see? Demands, ultimatums, condescension." "Okay," Kevin got up from his chair and started pacing the room. "Let's say we were wrong. Let's say we should have asked your opinion about the trip. But is that a reason to break up a family?" "You're the one who's destroying the family," I argued, "with your selfishness and disrespect. I simply refuse to be a part of this spectacle any longer." "What about the children?" Kevin tried a different approach. "They're used to you. Emily and Jacob will suffer." "The kids will suffer from your decision to go on vacation," I replied. Not my decision not to be a free babysitter." "But you can babysit for 1 week." Kevin sounded desperate. What's it worth to you? It cost me my self-respect, I said firmly, which I'd already lost by letting you push me around for 3 years. Kevin stopped at the window and looked out into the garden, where the roses I'd planted reminded me of Dorothy's flowers. Dad, I realize we made a mistake, he said without turning around. But think practically. Where are you going to go? You don't have a home. You don't have a job. At your age, starting over. At my age, it's not too late to get my dignity back, I interrupted him. And as for practical matters, that's my concern. And the money? Kevin turned to me. You said you wouldn't support us anymore. But think about it. We're used to a certain standard of living. The kids are used to good schools, extra classes. You want to take that away from them? That's my son's main concern. Not my well-being, not regretting what I said, but fear of losing financial support. Kevin, I said, sitting down on the bed next to the suitcase, you're 37 years old. You have an education, a profession, hands and a head. Why can't you provide for your family on your own? I am working, he was indignant. But you know what prices are like now. Mortgages, schools, health insurance. Millions of families live on one paycheck, I said, and they get by. But why should we bother when you can help us? He blurted out, and I realized I'd finally heard an honest answer. Exactly, I said calmly. Why should you bother? It's so much easier to live off your old dad. Kevin blushed, realizing that he'd said too much. That's not what I meant. That's exactly what you meant, I interrupted him. And that's the problem. You don't see me as a person with needs. To you, I'm just a source of money and free favors. There was another knock on the door, and this time Jessica came in. She looked worried and was holding a cup of tea. Son, Robert, I brought you some tea, she said in a conciliatory tone. I thought maybe we could talk calmly. Thank you, I replied, accepting the cup. But my decision won't change. Jessica sat down in the chair by the desk and looked at me carefully. Robert, I want to apologize for what I said, she began. I was really overreacting. Of course you're not a burden. You mean a great deal to this family. Her words sounded right, but there was no sincerity in them. It was the apology of someone who realized he'd overreached, not the remorse of someone who realized he'd been wronged. I appreciate the attempt, I replied, but it wasn't just those words. What was it about? She asked. It's that those words reflect how you really feel about me, I explained. For 3 years, you have taken my help for granted. For 3 years, I've been a convenient solution to your problems. But it's okay to help your family, Jessica said. My parents help us when they can, too. The difference is that your parents are living their own lives, I replied, and I've become an appendix to your life. Robert, let's be practical. Jessica switched to a businesslike tone. You're leaving. That's your right. But why start a financial revolution? You don't need the money. Do you? I asked. Well, we're used to a certain way of life, she admitted, and it would be hard to change things suddenly. Then you should have thought of that earlier, I said, before you gave me ultimatums. Kevin, who had been silently listening to our conversation, suddenly perked up. Dad, what if we could compromise? He suggested it. You stay, but we respect your opinion more. We consult with you on important issues. And continue to pay your bills? I clarified. Well, gradually we'll take on more of the expenses, he answered uncertainly. Gradually? When? I insisted. Over what period of time? Kevin and Jessica looked at each other, and I realized they had no plan. They just wanted things to stay the same, but with less conflict. Look, I said, finishing my tea, I'm not going to bargain. My decision is final. But where will you live? Jessica asked. Apartments are very expensive these days. I'll find something suitable, I replied. I have some savings. What if something happens? She persisted. What if you get sick? Who will take care of you? Not your concern, I repeated the phrase I'd already said in the kitchen. Of course it is, Kevin exclaimed. You're my father. Then act like a son, not a customer, I replied. He was silent, not knowing what to say. Jessica was silent too, looking at her hands. Robert, she finally said, what if we canceled our trip to Las Vegas? We stay home and spend time with our family. Hon, it's too late, I replied. It's not about the trip. It's about you showing your true colors. All people sometimes say things they regret, Kevin tried. You don't regret what you said, I countered. You regret the consequences. I stood up and walked to the window. The roses that I had planted in the garden, thinking that this was my new home, were blooming. Now these flowers will remind me of how easy it is to be wrong about people. Ha! The kids will wake up tomorrow and not see Grandpa at breakfast, Jessica said quietly. How are we going to explain to them? Tell them the truth, I answered without turning around. That Grandpa can no longer live with people who don't respect him. Robert, you can't be so cruel, Jessica asked. You were cruel, I replied. When you laughed at my feelings, when you gave me ultimatums, when you called me a burden. Kevin got up from his chair and walked over to me. Dad, for the last time, think again. Family is more important than pride. I turned and looked at my son, the man I'd once carried in my arms, taught to walk, read bedtime stories to. Now he stood before me not as a loving son concerned about his father's well-being, but as a man afraid of losing his comfortable life. Family is more important than pride, I agreed. But you stopped being family a long time ago. You've become consumers of my resources. That's not fair, Jessica objected. What's unfair has been your behavior all these years, I replied. I'm just making amends. They tried to talk me out of it for a while longer, with arguments ranging from the emotional to the practical. But I could see that their main concern was not my well-being, but their own financial stability. They couldn't understand or accept that their actions had consequences, that you can't endlessly take advantage of other people's kindness without giving anything in return. When they finally left my room, I finished packing. Tomorrow morning, I would leave to look for a new place to live, and they would stay behind to deal with the reality they had put off for so long. For the first time in 3 years, I felt free. This morning, I woke up at 7:30 out of habit, but I didn't set my alarm. For the first time in 3 years, I didn't have to make breakfast for my grandchildren, get them ready for school, plan the day around the needs of someone else's family. The house was still asleep. Not a sound came from Kevin and Jessica's bedroom, and the kids' rooms were silent as well. I quietly washed my face, dressed, and went down to the kitchen where the final scene of my life as a handy sponsor and babysitter had played out yesterday. I brewed the coffee in a pot, as Dorothy had done, rather than in the electric coffee maker I'd bought for this house. The flavor was different, richer, more homey. Strange how small habits can remind you of the past and point the way to the future. While the coffee cooled, I pulled out my phone and opened the rental listing app. It was time to turn yesterday's decision into today's reality. There were plenty of apartments in Irvine, but most of the prices made me wonder how much the cost of living had risen in recent years. One-bedroom studios cost as much as I'd paid for a two-bedroom apartment 20 years ago. But I had savings from the sale of the house on Maple Street, plus a decent pension, so it wouldn't be a problem. I picked out a few options in different parts of town and started calling the owners. The first apartment was in a new apartment complex near the center. The rental manager, a young woman named Sarah, spoke quickly and professionally, as if she were reading an advertising brochure. One-bedroom apartment, 45 square meters, modern kitchen, built-in appliances, air conditioning, parking space included in the price, she listed. Can you come to the inspection today at 10 o'clock in the morning? Sure, I answered. And what are the requirements for tenants? A certificate of income, a deposit of 2 monthly payments, references from a previous place of residence. But in your case, as far as I understand, you are moving out of the family home? Yes, I've lived with my son for the last 3 years. Then you can get a recommendation from him. It's usually a formality. I mentally chuckled, imagining what kind of recommendation Kevin might give me after yesterday's conversation. But those were technicalities that could be worked out. The second option was in a quieter neighborhood, in a small 2-story building where the top apartment was rented out. The owner, an older man named Harold, spoke slowly with a Texas accent. I've lived here for 30 years, he said. Wife died 5 years ago. Kids moved away. House got too big for one. Decided to rent out the top floor. I'm looking for a quiet tenant. No parties, no noise. Sent 'em. I fit that description, I replied. I'm 72 years old and live a quiet lifestyle. That's great. Why did you decide to move if it's not a secret? It's time to start living on my own, I said, without going into details. I understand. After my wife's death, I couldn't understand what I wanted from the rest of my life for a long time. But independence is important. Can you come at 1 o'clock? As I was writing down addresses and appointment times, I heard footsteps coming down the stairs. Jessica was coming down to the kitchen, and I could hear her whispering with Kevin upstairs. Apparently, they were discussing strategy for the morning, how to behave, what to say, how to try to talk me out of it. Good morning, Robert, Jessica said as she entered the kitchen. She was already dressed and combed her hair, which was unusual for 8:30 in the morning. Did you sleep well? Fine, I answered, putting my phone away. You're up early. I couldn't sleep after last night's conversation, she admitted, pouring herself a cup of coffee. Robert, are you really going to leave? I am, and I'm already looking for an apartment. But this is crazy. She sat across from me at the table. At your age, changing your surroundings, looking for a new place to live, settling in. At my age, it is especially important to live with dignity, I replied, not as a tolerable burden. Who called you a burden? Jessica was indignant. I said something stupid yesterday in a fit of emotion. Is it possible to destroy family ties because of one unfortunate word? Jessica, I said patiently, you and Kevin showed your true feelings toward me, not with one word, but with your entire demeanor. The ultimatums, the demands, the disregard for my opinion, it's not a random outburst, it's a pattern. Kevin came into the kitchen, already dressed, though he was usually asleep at this hour. His face was grim, and his eyes were reddish. Apparently, he hadn't slept well either. Good morning, Dad, he said, strained. Jessica's right. We need to think this through. I've already thought about it, I said. I'm going to look at apartments today. What about the kids? Kevin sat down at the table and sighed heavily. They'll wake up and they won't see Grandpa. How do you explain that to them? You tell them Grandpa has a life of his own. But they're used to you walking them to school, picking them up, helping them with their homework, Kevin continued, when it's a drastic change for the kids. So you're going to have to take on those responsibilities, I said, like most parents do. Jessica twirled her cup nervously in her hands. Robert, what if we renegotiated the financial arrangements? She suggested. You stay here, but we take on more expenses. Slowly, of course, but gradually. Gradual? How much time? I asked. Well, 6 months, a year, she said uncertainly. We need time to rebuild the budget. In 3 years, you have never rebuilt your budget towards independence, I said. On the contrary, you've become more and more dependent on my money. But this is a different situation, Kevin insisted. We realize we've gone overboard. You realize you could lose your comfortable life, I corrected him. They're different things. At 9:30, there was a stomping sound from the stairs, the kids waking up. Usually at this time, I was already preparing breakfast for them, but today I was sitting at the table with coffee, discussing my move with their parents. Mom, where's breakfast? Emily ran into the kitchen in her pajamas, her hair disheveled. Why is everyone so serious? I'll make it, baby, Jessica said, getting up from the table. Grandpa and Daddy are discussing important business. What kind of business? Emily asked, coming up to me and hugging me around the neck like she did every morning. I hugged my granddaughter and felt a sharp pain in my chest. Children are not to blame for their parents' behavior, but they will have to suffer the consequences. Grandpa is going to move into his apartment, I said gently. Why? Emily wondered. You have a room here. Sometimes grown-ups want their own place, I explained. Will you come over? Sure, I said, though I wasn't sure that was true. Jacob came down a few minutes later, even sleepier than usual. He too had to explain the situation, and he responded with childlike candor. Who's going to drive us to school if Grandpa moves? Mom and I, Kevin answered, and I could see him mentally rearranging his schedule. Who's going to make breakfast? Dad and I, Jessica said, clearly not thrilled at the prospect. And who's going to help with homework? We'll do it ourselves, Kevin answered, but there was no confidence in his voice. The children asked questions with childlike directness, but every question they asked was a blow to their parents, who suddenly realized how much Grandpa did and how many responsibilities they would have to take on. After breakfast, which Jessica prepared slowly and awkwardly, confusing the sequence of steps, I went up to my room to get the car keys. Kevin followed me. Dad, I'm asking you one last time. Think of the kids, he said, standing in the doorway. They love you, and I love them, I replied. But love doesn't mean I have to sacrifice my own dignity for the convenience of their parents. It's not convenience, it's family. On Hans, family is mutual respect and care, I replied, not one-sided exploitation. I took my keys and went to the exit. The kids' backpacks were in the hallway. Usually at this time, I was already loading them into the car, getting ready for the trip to school. Someone else would do it today. Robert, Jessica called out to me, if you find an apartment and move, at least leave us your address, in case something happens. If something happens, you'll call an ambulance, I answered, like all normal people do. The first apartment I looked at was in a modern apartment complex with a concierge in the lobby and a gym on the first floor. Sarah, the rental manager, walked me through all the rooms, showed me the fitted kitchen, spacious bathroom, large windows overlooking the city park. The apartment is vacant as of tomorrow, she said. The previous tenant is vacating tonight. If you are satisfied, we can sign the contract right now. What's the procedure? Standard. Passport, income certificate, or bank statement, a deposit of 2 monthly payments. You will be impressed by everything. A solid, respectable tenant. The apartment was really nice. Clean, bright, with a convenient layout. But there was something about it I didn't like. Maybe too much glass and metal, too little warmth. I'll think about it and call you back, I said to Sarah. Of course, but don't take too long. These apartments sell out fast. The second apartment was in Harold's house, and the atmosphere was completely different. It was an old house with wooden floors, high ceilings, windows with wooden frames. Harold showed me a spacious living room with a kitchen, a bedroom with a large bed, and an old-style bathroom. All the furniture stays, he explained. These are my late wife's things. She loved them very much. I can't throw them out, and I don't need them upstairs. The apartment reminded me of my home with Dorothy. The same style, the same warm and cozy atmosphere. What about the parking lot? I asked. The driveway is shared, and there's enough room for 2 cars. We will be good neighbors. I go to bed early, get up late, do not listen to music. What are the terms of the lease? The deposit is 1 month's rent, and the lease is renewable for a year. I don't like frequent changes of tenants. I prefer reliable people for a long term. I like the house and Harold. I could feel at home here, not in a hotel. I'll take it, I said. When can I move in? As soon as tomorrow, Harold smiled. We'll do the paperwork and welcome you to your new home. By the time I got back to Kevin's house, it was 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Jessica's car was gone. Apparently, she'd gone to pick up the kids from school, which I usually did. The house was unusually quiet. I went up to my room and began the final packing. The phone rang around 6 p.m. Kevin. Dad, where are you? The voice was worried. At home, in my room. Where were you this afternoon? We tried calling. I was looking at apartments, found a good one. Really? You sound desperate. Are you really going to move out? I'm moving out tomorrow morning, I confirmed. Dad, that's crazy. Think again. I've made up my mind, Kevin. What about us? My voice became pleading. How will we manage without your help? The same way millions of other families do, I answered. On our own. But we're not ready. We need time. You had 3 years to get ready to live on your own, I pointed out. Instead, you became more and more dependent. Okay. Kevin's voice became hard. If that's what you decide, then decide all the way. But don't expect us to maintain a relationship with a father who abandoned the family in a time of need. You're the one who gave the ultimatum, I reminded him. I just accepted your terms. I'll see you around, Dad. I hope you don't regret your decision. He hung up, and I realized that my son was trying to pressure me with the threat of a broken relationship. But that relationship had already been broken, by his words last night. That evening, as the family dined on pizza that had been ordered in, I went down to say goodbye to my grandchildren. Emily and Jacob hugged me tight, asked me to come visit, promised to call. Kevin and Jessica were silent, pretending to be busy eating. Goodbye, I said. Take care. Goodbye, Grandpa, the children said. The adults were silent. In my room, I finished packing the last of my things and went to sleep in the bed that would not be mine tomorrow. Outside the window, the Irvine night rumbled, and I thought about the fact that in a few hours, I would be starting a new life. The life of a free man who owed no one anything and from whom no one demanded anything. It was both scary and joyful at the same time. I woke up early in my new apartment, but not from the alarm clock. but from the unaccustomed silence. Outside the window, birds sang in the old oak trees that grew in Harold's yard. Not the honking of cars on a busy street like Kevin's house. The sun streamed into the bedroom through the wooden window frames, creating cozy streaks of light on the hardwood floor. For the first time in a long time, I felt at home. The move went quickly. I didn't have as much stuff as I thought I would. 2 suitcases of clothes, a box of books, pictures of Dorothy, a few memorabilia. My whole life fit into the trunk of the sedan. Harold helped carry things upstairs, showed me how the antique gas stove worked, where the spare keys were, explained the particulars of the plumbing in the old house. If anything breaks or you don't know how anything works, knock on the floor, he said with a smile. I'm almost always home. The kitchen was furnished with furniture from the 50s, wooden cabinets covered with many layers of paint, an old but serviceable stove, a refrigerator that was quieter than modern models. On the windowsill were pots of geraniums, a legacy of Harold's wife, which he continued to water as a memory of her. I brewed coffee in a coffee pot, as I'd done at home with Dorothy, and sat by the window with a cup. For the first time in years, no one demanded breakfast. No one had to be driven to school, no to-do list made by other people. It was a strange feeling, both liberating and a little scary at the same time. What to do with this freedom? The phone rang at 9:30 in the morning. The number was unfamiliar, but I answered. Robert? Jessica's voice sounded strained. It's me, calling from my office phone. I'm listening. Are you really not going to pay our bills anymore? It wasn't a request, but rather a demand for clarification. That's right, I confirmed. From now on, you are financially independent. But you can't just leave us. I raised my voice. We have children. You have children, so you are motivated to provide for them on your own. I replied calmly. Robert, be reasonable. We can't reorganize the entire budget in one day. You've had 3 years to learn to live within your means, I reminded him. 3 years ago, you offered to help. She was indignant. Temporary help in a difficult situation, I clarified. Not life support. All right, I said, my voice cold. Then don't expect the children to remember you as a kind grandfather. The children will realize the truth when they grow up, I replied and hung up. The second call came an hour later. This time it was Kevin. Dad, I'm at the bank, he said without greeting. They refuse to lend us enough money to cover our expenses. They say it's too much of a risk on my income. What do you want me to do? Can you be a guarantor? He asked. Or a certificate that you're helping us financially? No, I said. I don't help financially anymore. But how are we going to get out of this? I sounded panicked. The mortgage payment is due in 3 days. The electric bill is overdue. The kids need to pay school fees. Just like all normal families do, I repeated. Work more, spend less, live within their means. That's easy to say, but how do you do it practically? Not my problem, I said and disconnected. The third call came in the evening of the same day. Kevin again, voice tired. Dad, Jessica and I have been trying to work out the financial issues all day, he began. It's a disaster. Without your support, we can't maintain our current lifestyle. Then change your lifestyle, I advised. To what? You want us to live like poor people? I want you to live within your means, I replied. Like most people. But children are used to a certain level. Children will adjust to a new level, I said. Children in general are adaptable. It's adults who don't want to change their habits. Over the next few days, the calls became more frequent. Kevin asked to borrow money until payday. Jessica complained that the kids had nothing to eat because they were out of groceries and had no money for new purchases. I listened to their requests and complaints patiently, but I always said no. You've become cruel, Jessica said in one of our conversations. You used to be a kind grandfather, but now you've turned into a callous old man. I used to be a handy sponsor, I replied. Now I'm an independent man. The difference is fundamental. Meanwhile, my new life was beginning to work out. Harold turned out to be a pleasant neighbor. We sometimes had coffee in the backyard, discussing news or sharing memories. He would talk about his wife Martha, who had been a school teacher for 30 years, and I would talk about Dorothy and how we had built our house on Maple Street. You know, Robert, he once said, after Martha died, I thought life was over. 45 years together is a long time, but then I realized I could start a new chapter. Not better or worse than the last, just different. His words echoed in my soul. I too felt that I was starting a new chapter. Not as an adjunct to my son's family, but as an independent person with my own interests and plans. A week after the move, the calls from Kevin and Jessica became more desperate. They were behind on their mortgage payment, the electricity was threatened to be cut off, and the kids were complaining about the refrigerator being empty. But most importantly, they had to cancel their trip to Las Vegas. Rick is very disappointed, Kevin complained. We ruined his whole vacation plan. Rick will get over it, I said. And you will learn to plan your vacations according to your income. You're ruining our family, Jessica yelled into the phone. Shut up, Mom. I've freed your family from an unhealthy addiction, I corrected. By the end of the second week, their situation had become critical. Jessica found a part-time job selling cosmetics online, working evenings after her day job. Kevin took on additional projects at his consulting company, which meant working weekends. The kids complained that their parents had become jumpy and tired, that there was always someone working on the computer at home now. It's not normal, Kevin said during another call. We've turned into robots that just work. Welcome to real life, I replied. That's how most working parents live. But we're not the majority. We are your family. That's why you should be self-sufficient, I said. And not parasitize your elderly father. 3 weeks after I moved in, Kevin finally gave in. He arrived at my new house on a Saturday evening, looking tired and frazzled. I saw him from the window. He sat in the car for a long time, gathering his wits before knocking on the door. Hi, Dad, he said when I opened it. Can I come in? Sure, I replied, though I wasn't expecting anything good from this visit. He walked into the living room, looking at the 50s furniture, the pictures of Dorothy on the shelves, my books neatly arranged in the antique bookcase. It's cozy, he said without enthusiasm. Like a museum. I like it, I replied. Do you want coffee? Yes, thank you. While I made coffee, Kevin sat in the chair, silent. I could see that he was preparing for an important conversation, choosing his words, planning his persuasive strategy. Dad, he began as I handed him his cup, we need to have a serious talk. I'm listening. These past 3 weeks have been hell, he said bluntly. We've been working like hell. The kids only see us at bedtime, and we're still short on money. Jessica's on the verge of a nervous breakdown. I'm sleeping 4 hours a night. What do you want me to do? I asked, even though I knew the answer. Come back, he said simply. We realized we can't do this without your help. Come back and we'll forget everything. Forget what? I clarified. All the stupid fights, the hurt feelings, the wrong words. The main thing is that we are a family, and a family should stick together. I looked at my son carefully. His face was tired but not remorseful. He came not to apologize but to demand a return to the old order of things. What will change? I asked. We'll appreciate you more, he promised. We'll consult you on important matters and continue to live off me? Well, temporarily, yes, until we get back on our feet. Kevin, I said patiently, you haven't gotten back on your feet in 3 weeks because you don't want to change your lifestyle. You want to maintain the same level of consumption at my expense. What's wrong with that? He flared up. You have money. We have needs. Isn't it natural for a father to help his children? It's natural to help in emergencies, I agreed, but not to support an adult family on a permanent basis. We're not asking you to support us. Kevin was indignant. We're just asking you to help. 3 years of help is already maintenance, I pointed out. Kevin stood up and paced the room, the way he used to do when he was upset. Dad, you don't understand, he said. Life today is more expensive than it was in your day. Mortgages, insurance, children's education, medicine, everything costs a lot of money. But people manage somehow, I said, without the help of retired parents. Not everyone, he objected. Many families get help from the older generation. That's normal. They receive help, but they don't live completely off their parents, I clarified. We don't live off you completely, Kevin lied. I work, Jessica works. Your income only covers 1/3 of your expenses, I reminded him. I paid the rest. So? He stopped in front of me. You have that money. You don't spend it anyway. That was my son's true attitude towards my money. He considered it his by right, and I was just a temporary custodian of the family budget. My money belongs to me, I said firmly, and I decide how I spend it. What do you spend it on? Kevin asked mockingly. The rent on this old apartment? Books? On lonely dinners at cafes? On my freedom, I answered. The right to live my life the way I wanted, not the way others wanted me to live it. Freedom? Kevin laughed a bad laugh. What kind of freedom does a 72-year-old lonely old man have? More than a 72-year-old dairy cat, I answered. He fell silent, realizing that he had gone too far. But it was too late. The mask of the caring son had finally fallen off. All right, he said coldly. Then live your freedom. But don't expect us to have a relationship with a father who betrayed his family. I didn't betray anyone, I replied calmly. I just stopped letting you guys exploit me. As you wish, Kevin headed for the exit. Just remember, if you get sick or old, don't count on us to help you. Sadruwainam. I don't, I said. I have health insurance and money for a caregiver. I'll see you around, Dad. Or not. He slammed the door and I was alone in the silence of my new apartment. The sun was setting outside the window, coloring the room with warm golden tones. For the first time in a long time, I felt like a truly free man. It had been 4 months since I'd moved into Harold's apartment, and life was slowly taking on a new rhythm. In the morning, I woke up not from an alarm clock, but when I wanted to, drank coffee by the window, read the newspaper from cover to cover, without hurrying to work or to other people's business. During the day, I walked in the city parks, went to the library where I discovered new authors, and sometimes visited museums that I had never had time for before. In the evenings, he read, watched old movies, or just sat on the back porch with Harold, discussing the news or reminiscing about his youth. Money was spent wisely. Apartment rent, groceries, utilities, the occasional trip to the theater or restaurant. Without the need to support a family of 4, my budget became more than comfortable. I could afford quality groceries, good books, subscriptions to magazines I always wanted to read. It was strange to realize how much simpler life had become without the constant financial pressure of other people's needs. The calls from Kevin and Jessica stopped a month after his son's visit. The last call Jessica had made was to pay Jacob's dental bill, but she'd received a polite but firm refusal. After that, there was silence. Apparently, they realized that trying to get me back to my old role as a sponsor was futile. Sometimes I wondered how they were coping, but I was not tempted to find out the details of their lives. It was their life, their choice, their responsibility. I made my choice and did not regret it. One sunny October day, I was sitting in a downtown cafe reading a biography of Churchill when I heard a familiar voice. Robert? Robert Mills? No way. I looked up and saw Frank Anderson, an old work colleague of mine. I hadn't seen him in 4 years since he moved to San Diego to live with his daughter after he retired. Frank, I stood up and shook his hand. What are you doing in Irvine? Swana, my grandson is getting married, he smiled. The wedding's next week. I got here early. I wanted to see some of the old haunts. What are you doing here? I thought you lived with your son. I live alone now, I answered. I rent an apartment in an old house. Have a seat. Tell me how you're doing. Frank sat down at my table and ordered a coffee. He looked good for his 75 years, tanned, trim, with a keen interest in life in his eyes. What happened to the family nest? He asked cautiously. I remember when you said you'd moved in with your son after Dorothy's death. Things changed, I said diplomatically. I decided it was time to live on my own. Frank looked at me carefully. We'd worked together for 15 years and he could read between the lines. I see, he said. How do you feel about being alone? After so many years of married life, it must be difficult. Surprisingly, I feel great, I admitted. For the first time in years, I can do what I want, when I want. That's good, Frank approved. After Ellen died, I was confused at first too, and then I realized that old age is not the end of life, but another stage of it, with its own possibilities and joys. We talked for over an hour, reminiscing about mutual acquaintances, exchanging news, sharing plans. Frank told me how he learned to play golf at 70, how he travels with a group of other retirees, how he volunteers at the local animal shelter. What do you do? He asked. Any hobbies, pastimes? I read a lot, take walks, Study the history of the city, I said. Ashurn, I'm thinking of enrolling in an art class at the community center. Now, that's great, Frank was excited. You know, I've always envied people who can draw. I've got my hands in the wrong place. I've always wanted to try, but I never had time, I admitted. First work, then family, then grandchildren. You've got plenty of time now, Frank said. The main thing is not to waste it regretting the past. His words echoed in my soul. Indeed, I almost never regretted the decision. Sometimes I remembered my grandchildren, missed their laughter and chatter, but I realized that it was wrong to sacrifice my dignity for that. What about the children? Frank asked. Do they support your decision? Not really, I answered honestly. They were comfortable living off me, but that's their problem, not mine. I understand. My daughter and I also had a disagreement when I refused to put the house in her name. She thought she was entitled to my property now. I had to explain that I was still alive and planned to live longer. We laughed, realizing that the problems of adult children seeing their parents as a source of financial wealth are quite common. You know, Robert, Frank said, finishing his coffee, I understand your point. After a certain age, it's important to live for yourself and not for other people's expectations, even if those expectations come from your own children. Exactly, I agreed, although it's not easy to realize that after so many years of self-denial. What did Dorothy say? Frank asked. She was a wise woman. I thought about his question. Dorothy was indeed wise, and she always said that we should help children to become self-reliant, not make them dependent on parental support. She used to say that the best gift parents give to their children is to teach them how to live their own lives, I replied. I guess that's why I made this decision. She was a wise woman, Dorothy, Frank nodded. And you did the right thing, even though it wasn't easy. We exchanged phone numbers and agreed to keep in touch. Frank invited me to visit him in San Diego, and I promised to think about it. After he left, I sat in the cafe for a long time, reflecting on our conversation. Meeting an old friend had reinforced my confidence in my decision. Frank was a living example of how you can live a full life in old age, without becoming an appendage to the families of adult children. In the evening, already at home, I was sitting in a chair by the window with a book when the phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but something compelled me to answer it. Grandpa Robert? A quiet child's voice was barely audible. Emily, I wondered. Baby, is that you? Yes, it's me. The voice became more confident. Grandpa, I'm calling you from my girlfriend's cell phone. Mom and Dad don't know. My heart squeezed with tenderness and anxiety at the same time. What's up, sweetie? I asked. How's school? How are you doing? Fine, she answered. Grandpa, why don't you live with us anymore? Mom says you've become bad and left us. I closed my eyes, feeling the pain of how adults use children in their conflicts. Emily, Grandpa didn't turn bad, I said carefully. It's just that sometimes adults have to live apart. It doesn't mean I don't love you. Why are Mom and Dad so mean now? She asked quietly. They're always fighting and saying there's no money. Adults sometimes get in a bad mood when they have problems, I explained. But it's not your fault. Grandpa, can you come and visit us? She asked. I miss you. Jacob misses you too, but he won't talk. Tears came to my eyes. This was the hardest part of my decision, being separated from grandchildren who didn't understand adult conflicts. Baby girl, Grandpa misses you too, I said. But I can't come now. Parents do not want to see me. When can I come? She insisted. I don't know, Emily. Maybe when you're older and can make your own decisions. Will you live far away? Not too far away, in the same town. Grandpa, his voice became very quiet. Is it true that you're the reason we don't have any money? This is it. Children suffer the consequences of adult decisions, and adults put the responsibility for those consequences on them. Emily, listen carefully, I said seriously. Bastoni, parents have to make their own money for the family. That's their job. Grandparents can help, but they don't have to support adult children. But Mom says you were rich and could have helped us, she continued. Grandpa has money for his own life, I explained, and it's the right thing to do. When you grow up, you too will work and earn money for your family. I see, she said, though I realize that at 10 years old, these things are hard to fully comprehend. Emily, Grandpa loves you very much, I said, and Jacob too. Remember that always. I love you too, Grandpa, and I don't think you're bad. Thank you, sweetie. Now go home before your parents come looking for you. Goodbye, Grandpa. Goodbye, baby. I hung up the phone and sat in silence, digesting this conversation. On the one hand, it hurt to hear that the kids were being turned against me. On the other hand, it was good to know that at least Emily understood that Grandpa hadn't become a bad person, just a different situation. It was getting dark outside, and the lights were coming on in the windows of the neighboring houses. Families were having dinner, children were doing their homework, parents were solving everyday problems. The normal life of ordinary people who live within their means and don't expect anyone to solve their problems for them. I got up and made myself some tea, as I did every night in my new life. The life of a free man who owed no one anything, and from whom no one demanded anything. A life I had chosen for myself, paid for by breaking up with my son's family. Emily's call showed me that this breakup was painful not only for me, but for the children as well. But I realized there was no alternative. To return to my old role would mean betraying myself and losing my self-respect completely. Outside the window, the autumn wind rustled the yellowed leaves on the old trees. Nature was preparing for winter, shedding everything unnecessary, getting ready for a new cycle of life. Maybe I needed to shed all the excess, false commitments, other people's expectations, unhealthy relationships, to start a new phase of life clean and free. I finished my tea and went to get ready for bed. Tomorrow was a new day of a new life, a life I could finally call my own.